There are over 500 puzzle panels you can solve in The Witness. They come in a variety of shapes and colors, but the one thing that they all have in common is the shape of their line. Each starts with a circle and terminates in a friendly, rounded tip. Thanks to the abundance of panels, it is the most common shape you will see on the island. You will see it again and again and again as you solve panel after panel. All you do is solve panels. The Witness has no buttons for you to push. There are no wheels you must turn, no ropes to pull, no knobs to spin. It's your line that makes gates open, windmills turn, and bridges extend. These mazes aren't just puzzles, they're representations of your path through the world. Lines finish mazes, and mazes are the backbone of change. But what happens in your mind when that notion is suddenly and surprisingly expanded in a single flash of insight? It was a moment of epiphany like that originally inspired Jonathan Blow to make The Witness.
A couple years before Braid came out, several years before Braid came out, I was working on some prototypes of some games, and one of them was like a 3D gestural spellcasting game where you would like draw the shape,
and that would,
right, and that was your spell. Like a lot of these games, you know, you'd be going through a dungeon and you'd find some scroll that teaches you a thing, or you buy it in the shop, and you find some scroll that like has the symbol on it that you could trace, right? So that was, in a very classic way, that was going to be how you could learn the spells. But the most powerful spells were not going to be those. There were going to be things hidden in the environment that you would have to find yourself, and that would be a big surprise when you realize, like,
together,
oh
like,
shit,
oh wait, that's the thing. One of the spells.
Yeah. And so one of the moments that I had in my head about that game was like you're exploring and you reach the top of a mountain somewhere, and you look down, and like the path that you walked on to get up there looked a lot like a spell shape. And if you were curious enough to try tracing that, you would learn the spell. Then where this game came from then, the idea was like, okay, I'm gonna take that exciting moment of being up on the mountain and seeing a thing and then tracing it and like having that expansion of your horizons, right? But if that's the really valuable thing, I don't really need all the wizard stuff, because a lot of games do that.
Sure.
I'm gonna focus down to exactly what I care about and build out from there.
When puzzle panels are all you know, it's quite a shock to find that the whole world can be a puzzle too. But it's not the same if you're simply told the secret. This panel on the mountaintop could have been made of transparent glass, but it wasn't, and neither are these panels in the orchard. You need to make that mental leap by yourself in order to discover the feeling that the developers are aiming for. These apple tree puzzles are your first hint that the world of The Witness is a careful construct. The attention to detail is an elaborate misdirection. It all fades from importance when you see the simple truth. Some of the earliest concept art of the fort depicts the distinctive apple tree puzzles within its barrier wall. In fact, it seems like these tree puzzles were the only puzzles you'd solve to bring the force field down. It was probably a good idea to ease players into the game's panel tracing concept before asking them to move beyond it. So Thekla moved these puzzles out of the fort and replaced them with basic mazes. The agricultural yard adds some minor complications, but all the puzzles we've dealt with so far are contained within the boundaries of the panel. The orchard extends the maze metaphor out from the panels and into the material world. What is a tree, after all, but a maze in one dimension? The trick is that the maze's finish is only visible in the material world beyond the panel. The second puzzle forces you to physically move away from the panel to examine the tree in three-dimensional space in order to find the solution. Each successive puzzle requires a little more analytical effort, forcing you to move around and view each tree from a different perspective. The game is training you to see the answer in your mind's eye, connecting the problems you can touch with the solutions you cannot. But someone can. This little nook is the first sign of an individual presence on this island, someone who took interest both in bonsai tree cultivation and the human circulatory system, someone with balanced thought. I'll refer to them as the artist, and their nook displays that same dualism that Heisenberg brought up in that quote in the agricultural yard. The bonsai trees, whose beauty grows from their careful cultivation, is a clear allusion to Asian mysticism, where the art of bonsai originates, and the key tenet of which is an appreciation of nature. And on the desk shaded by sheets of rusted iron lies a sketch of the human heart, whose veins and arteries resemble nothing so obviously as the branches of the trees you've passed. But it turns out that the witness has no use for dualism. Life is more complicated than just blue or green, science or spirituality. The artist's nook is where we can see these ideas start to combine into something more interesting than just a single side of an argument. The anatomical sketches hint at the darker nature of scientific inquiry. Is the search for truth worth the cost in environmental damage? As Western scientists began to understand more and more of the natural world, they developed the arrogant notion that their mastery entitled them to a piece of it. On the other hand, the ancient Chinese believed that nature was sacred, an extension of the divine, and that the creation of simulacra could capture some of that divinity in a man-made object. The illusion of bonsai came from the desire to produce natural, asymmetrical beauty through artificial means. This is the great irony of bonsai, and indeed most art in general. Like a bonsai tree, the island is a collection of carefully designed objects meant to be perceived as purely natural. And these objects of contemplation aren't separated into artificial dichotomies like science and spirituality. They mix and mingle into complicated statements, combining ideas from different regions of the island until they come to mean something new. That's why the nook wraps around the windmill, the host of the island's most important philosophical texts, and borders the town, which acts as the island's geographical and ideological hub. Once you complete the orchard, you've learned everything you need to understand the rest of the island. Though it was originally conceived as the beginning of the witness's tutorial, the orchard is better suited to be its conclusion. We're trained by solving simple mazes, so it's fitting to conclude with mazes whose solutions extend beyond their own physical boundaries. But the orchard isn't just the end of the game's tutorial. It underscores one of the witness's key themes, that any belief untested by doubt isn't worth holding. We begin each area in the witness in virtual ignorance. Maybe we know what to do based on information we learned in another area, but those first puzzles are always a leap of faith. We form a theory, and then we test it. Each successive puzzle presents us with new information, and we must refine our theories to reach a conclusion that agrees with all the information we are given. Every new panel is a new challenge to our beliefs. This process is known as the scientific method, but there's no reason that it can't also apply to spiritual thought. But motivating it all are moments of epiphany. There are a few different kinds of epiphany found in the witness. There's the aha moment you get when you solve a particularly hard puzzle, and there's the subtler understanding felt when you grasp a puzzle type. These are the epiphanies found in the fort and the agricultural yard. Then there are the visual Easter eggs hidden around the environment, whose presence and understanding go unacknowledged. You either get something out of them or you don't. The environmental puzzles are tracked and acknowledged, but their significance is similarly hard to define. But the most important feeling of epiphany comes when you make the connection between the puzzles and the quotes you can find nearby. The behind-the-scenes recordings you can find once you've gotten under the mountain indicate that these quotations are the entire reason for the island's creation. The developers would consider your time on the island complete when your experiences on the island affect the way you feel and how you interpret the quotations. The orchard is meant to train you in this higher epiphany. When you realize that the artist has already taken the final puzzle's apple, you realize that these puzzles can truly extend beyond their glass and metal housing. The environment itself is both puzzle and solution. We cannot affect this world. You are here to listen, watch, and learn. You are the witness. So look around you and notice that the apples on the trees are a bright, ripe red. The sliced apple on the tray hasn't browned with time. The sun doesn't move in the sky. The first environmental puzzle we find might be a coincidence, but finding another helps us realize that this island is designed. This place is not real, and its careful construction clashes constantly with its obvious artificiality. But maybe that's the point. Your senses can be tricked in any number of ways, but it's only within your mind that you can begin your search for the truth with a capital T. Trust your curiosity, because it's the only thing on this island that you know to be real. The gulf between your mind and the world of your senses can never be bridged, except in flashes of epiphany.